first things first, a little about me. I'm a huge fan of history. I always have been. Every history class, I've always been super engaged, and I love this idea of taking past events and learning from them. I thought this picture was relevant because I feel like it. So just to give a quick synopsis of my project. My project is a podcast done in about 20 to 30 minutes, and I did this so it would be relatively concise, but also broad enough to cover a full range of topics and to really give the listener a good idea of these topics. It's recorded with two other co-hosts, Austin Cohen and my friend Ethan Ruiz. I did this so it could be almost like three friends, discussing these historical events, and it gives the listener something to be entertained by, and for the most part, it's relatively comedic in nature. So the evolution of this was, I initially chose to do a screenplay, but I realized a screenplay is a lot of work, and it's really difficult, and it wasn't something that I was horribly passionate about. I wanted to do something that I had a passion for, and the reason I chose the screenplay was, I wrote plays for Ben Davis Theater, and I decided that a screenplay was the natural progression of things, but I didn't like that idea. So I thought a little bit, and I decided I love history, so why don't I do a podcast over history? And so that's essentially how I got to where I am. That's a picture of me shaving one of my actors during the show. So the planning for this was, relatively simple. So essentially, I took my friend Ethan. I said, Ethan, I want to make this podcast. I know you have recording equipment, and I'd love for you to be my co-host. And he's like, that's a great idea. I'd love to do this. So we got together, we collaborated, and then I realized I had to do research on these. And so when you're doing a podcast over obscure topics, it's naturally hard to find information on those topics because they're obscure. So I had to go through a list of these historical events, and then I had to find archives over them, and I did a lot of digging, and it was really fun to sit down with my friends and just go through these historical events and go through them and research them, and it was just a lot of fun just being able to do this with my friends. And so the resources I used were pretty simple. So my friend and I, after all the research was found and we got everything set up, we sat down at his computer, we got a mic out, and we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And so what we did was we just sat down and we just started recording. And we would toss around these ideas on the microphone, and we would just have this natural flow of talking about these events, and then just having banter back and forth. And it was a lot of fun. And so we used the microphone, and then after all was said and done, we used his editing software, and we had a working episode, and we were really proud of it. So the biggest lessons I learned, and all throughout Capstone, one thing I heard about was always soft skills. What are you learning from this? What are the soft skills you're learning? And the biggest thing I learned was having conviction is really hard. It is really difficult because, every day after class, it would be my capstone period, and I'm like, wow, I should really get to work on this podcast. And then I wouldn't get to work on the podcast. And eventually there came to a point where I was like, I really need to sit down, and I just need to work on this. I need to do research, and I just need to get this done. And so one day I just sat down, and I looked up an event, and I just started researching it. And I just kept researching it, and I wrote everything down about it. I was like, that was really fun. I'm glad I did that. And then it just snowballed, and it became easier and easier. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I got from this is, even though having the drive to do something is difficult if you have no external motivation for it, if you just keep going with it and you tell yourself you can do it and you just do it, it gets way easier. So that was my biggest takeaway from this project. So the accomplishments, I did get an episode successfully recorded, and my friend and I have edited it and relatively mastered it, and it'll actually be unveiled by the end of this week. So if you go on SoundCloud and you look up Goofy History, you will find my profile, you can subscribe to it, you can follow it, and then you will get notifications when every new episode comes out. And hopefully by the end of this week there will be my first episode. Excellent. Are there any questions about my project? Yes.
Are you guys going to talk about the team more?
Yes.
why don't you share with us a little bit about your first recording that you're doing?
Okay, so the first recording, that's great. I'm so glad you asked. So, I knew the first thing I wanted to do when I started this project was I was like, I want to do the Australian Emu War, and it was essentially a war that the Australian soldiers fought after returning home from World War I, and a large migration of emus started eating their crops. And so these men had to take up arms against the emus, and they lost. And the fight with birds won, and now the emu is one of the most abundant birds in Australia. So that's the synopsis of the Emu War, and if you tune in to Goofy History, you will hear all about this, and you will be much more informed.
You have a couple other ones that you're working on also,
Yes, I do also. And then the second episode is over Grigori Rasputin, who was a Russian monk, and he was a faith healer. And so most of my episodes, though, are over these obscure people, these obscure events. And one side note I also wanted to add in is the fact that the reason I decided to do this, my biggest motivation was I think a lot of people feel that history is boring. I think that's really sad because I think history is really important to know about. I read a statistic that I think only 56% of Americans know that America was like signed into creation 1776. Isn't that crazy? That's not a lot of people at all. That means that in a room of 100 people, I think it was, I can't remember the exact statistic, but over 40 people in that room would not know when America was born. And so I thought that was really sad. And I was like, a lot of people think history is incredibly boring, and it's so important to know about. And so the reason I made this podcast was I can take these events that are really exciting in nature, and if just one person listens to it, and they go, wow, that was really interesting, I want to learn more about this, then they'll learn more about this topic, and then they can learn more about history in general, and I think that's really important. And I'd love to spark this love of history in somebody like it was sparked in me a few years ago. So thank you for listening.